What if I told you that the single most powerful food you could eat to protect your aging brain, strengthen your heart, and slash your risk of dying from the most common diseases after 60 is something you can buy at any grocery store for about $4 a bag? And what if I told you that most seniors walk right past it every single week without giving it a second thought? Because here's what's remarkable. Researchers at some of the world's most respected institutions have spent decades studying thousands of different foods, plants, herbs, and compounds. They ran clinical trials. They tracked thousands of participants over years, and time again, one food kept rising to the top of every category that matters most to people over 60: brain health, heart health, blood sugar control, inflammation, vision, and longevity. This is not a supplement. It is not expensive. It doesn't require a prescription or a trip to a specialty health store. The science is clear. The evidence is overwhelming. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why this food deserves a permanent place in your daily diet, how much to eat, when to eat it, and what form gives you the absolute best results. Stay with me, because this one is going to change how you think about what's on your plate. I'm Dr. James, and this channel is dedicated to bringing you the latest evidence-based research on health and nutrition, all of it translated into practical advice designed specifically for men and women over 60. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd encourage you to do that now so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos on senior health. We post new research regularly, and the things we're covering in the next few weeks are ones you genuinely do not want to miss. Now let's get into it. The number one healthiest food on earth for seniors over 60 is blueberries. I know, some of you expected something more exotic. Maybe you were thinking moringa, or some rare Himalayan berry only available online, or some obscure superfood that costs $40 a pound. But the answer is blueberries, and the depth of science behind that answer will absolutely surprise you. The United States Department of Agriculture's Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging, based at Tufts University, has been studying the relationship between diet and aging for decades. Their research on blueberries is some of the most cited nutritional science in the world. What they found is that the specific compounds in blueberries, a class of pigments called anthocyanins, interact with the human body in ways that are genuinely extraordinary, particularly in people over 60. Here's why this matters so much for your age group specifically. After 60, your body faces a set of biological challenges that simply didn't exist at 40. Inflammation increases. Oxidative stress, damage from unstable molecules called free radicals, begins to accumulate faster than your body can neutralize it. Your blood vessels stiffen. Your brain's communication pathways begin to slow. These are not inevitable diseases. They are biological processes, and blueberries, it turns out, contain some of the most potent natural compounds on Earth for interrupting every single one of those processes. Let me walk you through the evidence, because I want you to understand exactly what's happening inside your body when you eat these. We'll start with your brain, because for most seniors I speak with, cognitive health is their number one fear. And the research here is genuinely remarkable. A 2020 study published in the European Journal of Nutrition tracked adults between 60 and 75 years old over a 12-week period. One group consumed the equivalent of 1 cup of fresh blueberries daily. The other group consumed a placebo. At the end of the trial, the blueberry group showed statistically significant improvements in memory accuracy, processing speed, and what researchers call executive function, your ability to plan, focus, and solve problems. The differences weren't subtle. They were measurable on standardized cognitive tests. How does this work? The anthocyanins in blueberries cross what's called the blood-brain barrier. That barrier is essentially a filter that protects your brain from harmful substances, but it also blocks many compounds from reaching brain tissue. Anthocyanins are one of the few dietary compounds that can actually pass through. Once inside the brain, they reduce neuroinflammation, which is inflammation specifically affecting brain cells, and they promote something called neuroplasticity, which is your brain's ability to form new connections. In plain English, blueberries feed and protect the very tissue that keeps you sharp. But here's what shocked me when I first reviewed this research. A separate long-term study following over 16,000 women by Harvard's T.H. Chan School of Public Health. found that women who consumed 2 or more servings of blueberries per week delayed cognitive aging by an average of 2.5 years. 2.5 years of preserved brain function, just from a dietary habit. That is not a minor finding. That is life-changing. Now, I want to tell you about a patient whose experience really illustrates what we're talking about here. Margaret was 71 years old when she came to see me, frustrated and scared. She'd been noticing for about 8 months that she was struggling to recall names, people she'd known for years. She'd walk into a room and forget why she went there. She was losing her train of thought mid-sentence. Her doctor had run standard cognitive screenings, and while nothing pointed to dementia, she knew something had changed. She told me, "I feel like I'm losing myself." We looked at her diet together. She was eating reasonably well. Vegetables, lean protein, not a lot of processed food. But her fruit intake was almost zero. We made one specific change. She added 1 cup of blueberries to her daily routine every morning with breakfast. Within 6 weeks, Margaret told me she was noticing a difference. Within 3 months, her word recall had improved noticeably enough that her daughter commented on it without being prompted. Margaret's results aren't a clinical trial, but they are consistent with what the research predicts. And her story reflects what I hear from seniors who make this change. Now let's talk about your heart, because cardiovascular disease remains the leading cause of death in Americans over 65. And the evidence for blueberries here is just as strong. A clinical trial published in the Journal of the American Heart Association in 2019 tested the cardiovascular effects of daily blueberry consumption in adults with metabolic syndrome, a cluster of conditions including high blood pressure, elevated cholesterol, and excess abdominal weight that dramatically increases heart disease risk. The trial lasted 6 months. Participants consumed 1 cup of blueberries daily. The results were striking. Systolic blood pressure, the top number in your reading, dropped by an average of 5 points. Arterial stiffness, a key measure of cardiovascular aging, decreased significantly. HDL cholesterol, the protective kind, improved. And one of the lead researchers noted that the magnitude of the cardiovascular benefit was comparable to what you'd expect from some pharmaceutical interventions, without any of the side effects. The mechanism comes back to those anthocyanins again. They stimulate the production of nitric oxide in your blood vessel walls. Nitric oxide causes vessels to relax and widen, which reduces blood pressure and improves blood flow throughout your entire body, including to your heart muscle itself. Think of your arteries like a garden hose. A stiff, inflexible hose means higher pressure and less efficient flow. Blueberries help keep that hose flexible. It's a simple analogy, but it captures biology accurately. I want to ask you something. Comment below with your current blood pressure reading, or even just your age and whether heart health is something you're actively managing. I ask because it helps me understand what our community is dealing with, and it helps me tailor the content we cover to what you actually need. Now, beyond the brain and heart, there are several other benefits to blueberries that are particularly relevant for seniors, and I want to make sure you understand all of them before we get to the protocol. Blood sugar control is a massive one. Type 2 diabetes affects roughly 1 in 3 Americans over 65, and prediabetes is even more common. A 2021 study from the British Journal of Nutrition found that adults who consumed blueberries regularly showed significantly lower fasting blood sugar levels and improved insulin sensitivity compared to controls. The anthocyanins appear to influence glucose metabolism at a cellular level, essentially helping your cells respond to insulin more efficiently. Your eyes are another area where blueberries offer striking protection. The retina, the light-sensitive tissue at the back of your eye, is one of the most metabolically active tissues in the human body, and one of the most vulnerable to oxidative damage. Blueberries contain compounds called lutein and zeaxanthin, which accumulate specifically in the macula, the central part of your retina. Research published in Nutrients in 2020 found that regular blueberry consumption was associated with reduced risk of age-related macular degeneration, which is the leading cause of vision loss in adults over 60. If you or someone you love is concerned about preserving eyesight, this matters. And then there's inflammation, the underlying driver of virtually every chronic disease that becomes more common after 60. Arthritis, Alzheimer's, cancer, heart disease. All of them are linked to chronic low-grade inflammation. A 2022 analysis published in Food and Function reviewed 29 separate studies on blueberry consumption and inflammatory markers. The conclusion was consistent across virtually all of them. Regular blueberry consumption significantly reduces circulating levels of inflammatory molecules, particularly one called interleukin-6, which is one of the most reliable biological markers of chronic disease risk. This is not one benefit with a lot of marketing around it. This is one food, supported by hundreds of peer-reviewed studies across multiple independent research institutions, consistently delivering measurable results in the exact areas that matter most to people over 60. Before I get into the exact protocol, and I am going to give you a very specific one, let me tell you about one more patient because his story addresses a concern I hear constantly. Frank was 68 and diabetic. His doctor had already told him to limit fruit intake due to the natural sugar content, so he had basically eliminated fruit from his diet entirely. When I mentioned blueberries, he immediately pushed back. "Aren't those full of sugar?" he asked. It's a fair question, and it's one that a lot of seniors have been confused about because of well-meaning but overly simplified advice about fruit and blood sugar. Here's what I explained to Frank. Blueberries have a glycemic index of around 53, which is actually considered low. They also contain fiber, which slows glucose absorption. Unlike fruit juice or dried fruit, whole blueberries produce a moderate, gradual rise in blood sugar rather than a spike. The research I just described, from the British Journal of Nutrition, was specifically conducted on adults with insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. Those are people whose blood sugar is already a concern, and blueberries still improved their outcomes. Frank was cautious but willing to try. He added half a cup of blueberries to his morning oatmeal each day and monitored his glucose closely. His readings didn't spike. After 6 weeks, his fasting glucose had actually come down by 11 points. He came back grinning and said, "I wish someone had told me this 3 years ago." Frank is not a clinical trial, but his experience is consistent with the published science on blueberries and glycemic response. Now I want to address something before we get to the protocol, because this is where I see a lot of people go wrong, and it could mean the difference between getting real results and getting none at all. Not all blueberries deliver the same benefit, and the way you consume them matters significantly. This is something the research makes very clear, and I want to spend a moment here because it's genuinely important. Fresh blueberries are excellent when they're in season and at peak ripeness. They are flavorful. They deliver the full spectrum of anthocyanins, and if you enjoy them, fresh is a great choice. But here's what surprises most people. Frozen blueberries are actually equal to or sometimes superior to fresh for most of their health benefits. The reason is that the freezing process actually breaks down the cell walls slightly, which makes the anthocyanins more bioavailable, meaning your body can absorb them more efficiently. A study published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry confirmed that the antioxidant capacity of frozen blueberries was comparable to fresh and in some cases higher. This is important news for seniors on a budget or for those who don't live near good fresh produce. A bag of frozen wild blueberries at Walmart, Costco, or any major grocery store costs roughly $3 to $5 and gives you a week or more of daily servings. This is genuinely affordable, year-round nutrition. Here's something else worth knowing. Wild blueberries, sometimes labeled as low-bush blueberries, have been shown in multiple studies to contain significantly higher concentrations of anthocyanins than the larger cultivated varieties. Wild blueberries are smaller and darker. They tend to come frozen rather than fresh, and brands like Wyman's Wild Blueberries are widely available. If you have a choice, choose wild. But if wild isn't available or is too expensive, the standard frozen or fresh varieties still deliver remarkable benefits. Now let's get specific because I know you came here for a protocol you can actually follow, and I'm not going to give you vague advice. Here is exactly what the evidence supports, and what I recommend for adults over 60. Your target is 1 cup of blueberries per day. That's approximately 148 grams, or 1 standard measuring cup. You do not need more than this. The studies consistently show that this dose is where the cognitive and cardiovascular benefits plateau. More is not necessarily better. Eat them in the morning, if possible. Research suggests that consuming blueberries earlier in the day, particularly with breakfast, supports blood sugar stability throughout the day. Add them to oatmeal, plain yogurt, or a smoothie, or simply eat them on their own. A small amount of healthy fat consumed with blueberries, like a tablespoon of almond butter or a handful of walnuts, has been shown to enhance the absorption of fat-soluble components of the berries. This is a simple optimization that takes no extra effort. If you choose frozen, do not cook them if you can avoid it. High heat degrades anthocyanin significantly. Thaw them overnight in the refrigerator, or simply add them to oatmeal at the very end after cooking. If you're blending them into a smoothie, that's fine. Blending does not significantly reduce their potency. For supplements, blueberry extract supplements do exist, and some studies have investigated them. However, the whole food consistently outperforms isolated extracts in clinical research, and the full matrix of fiber, vitamins, and phytocompounds in real blueberries appears to be important to the overall effect. I recommend whole blueberries, fresh or frozen, over any supplement claiming to replicate them. Give this at least 8 weeks of consistent daily consumption before evaluating your results. Cognitive benefits in particular are cumulative. They build over time. You will likely not notice a dramatic difference after 3 days. You may notice subtle improvements in energy, digestion, and perhaps blood pressure within 2 to 3 weeks. The full neurological and cardiovascular benefits develop over several months of consistent intake. A few safety notes that I want to be clear about. Blueberries are safe for the vast majority of people, including those with diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease. They have no known serious drug interactions. However, if you are taking warfarin or any blood-thinning medication, it is worth mentioning to your doctor that you are increasing your blueberry intake, simply because any significant dietary change involving antioxidant-rich foods can occasionally affect how the medication works, though the risk with blueberries specifically is considered very low. If you have a known sensitivity or allergy to berries, start with a small amount and monitor your response. And as with any dietary change, if you have a complex medical history, a brief conversation with your physician is always appropriate. Also, watch for these on your grocery store label. Look for blueberries with no added sugars, no syrups, no sweeteners, especially with frozen varieties. Some brands add sweeteners that would undermine the benefits, particularly for blood sugar control. Plain frozen blueberries should have exactly one ingredient: blueberries. Here's the bottom line for everything we covered today. Of the thousands of foods that have been studied for their effect on aging, brain health, cardiovascular protection, inflammation, blood sugar, and longevity, blueberries have the most consistent, most replicated, and most clinically meaningful evidence behind them for adults over 60. They are accessible, they are affordable, and the daily habit of eating 1 cup takes less than 2 minutes. 1 cup of blueberries per day, preferably wild, preferably frozen or fresh without added sugar, with breakfast, ideally alongside a small amount of healthy fat, every single day for at least 8 to 12 weeks. That is a change anyone can make. And based on the research, it may be one of the highest impact decisions you make for your health this year. Now I want to hear from you. Comment below and choose one of these 3 options. Comment starting today if you're going to add blueberries to your breakfast tomorrow morning. Comment your age and whether you've already been eating blueberries regularly, because I'm genuinely curious how many people in this community are already doing this. Or comment sharing this if there's someone in your life, a spouse, a sibling, a parent, who needs to hear this information. Your comments help this video reach more people who need it, and I read as many of them as I can. If you found this valuable, please subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. In our next video, we're going to look at the one nutrient that nearly every senior over 65 is deficient in, and it's not vitamin D, which is what most people guess. It's something far less talked about, and the deficiency is directly linked to muscle weakness, falls, and cognitive decline. You will not want to miss that one. I'm Dr. James. Take care of yourself. You've earned it, and you deserve to feel your best.